Over 5 million people across 13 states are without power, and at least 10 deaths have been reported so far as Superstorm Sandy makes its way up the east coast of the U.S. You're watching footage shot by reporters on World Stream. I'm Deborah. Welcome to this special edition of Asia Today. The pictures say it all. Parts of Manhattan submerged in water, sending cars floating down streets, and subway stations downtown filling up with seawater in what's being described as the subway's worst disaster in history. A construction crane in Midtown partially collapses 65 stories high, forcing several buildings to evacuate. Also evacuated patients from New York University's hospital after the backup generator failed. As if wind and rain aren't enough, several eastern states now face a massive snowstorm. Earlier, I spoke to Wall Street Journal reporter Jonathan Chang about what the stock market closure means and how Manhattan has turned into a ghost town.
Last night at 7 p.m., they shut down the subway system here in New York, which, like in Hong Kong, is how most people get around. Most people haven't stepped outside today, but I was able to catch a ride into the office today and did some reporting and wrote a story about the stock market, which has been closed for all of Monday and will be closed again on Tuesday. And now I'm back home. It's about midnight here now in New York.
Okay, so are the streets pretty much deserted, and are there a lot of taxis around? I mean, if you do need to get around, is there a way to do so?
Right. Well, earlier in the day, I was surprised to see how many tourists were around Times Square. Our offices in New York are near Times Square, and you could still see a lot of pizza shops. A couple of coffee shops were still open, and a lot of tourists were walking around taking photos in Times Square. On the way back, this was about 3 or 4 in the afternoon, the streets were a lot quieter. The storm finally hit land at 7 o'clock here in the U.S., 7 p.m. I was still able to get a dinner at a diner that was around the corner from where I live, and it was pretty full in there because it's just about the only place that's open still. Supermarkets are all closed, and taxis, you see them, and I've had a couple taxis stop while I was walking and asked me if I wanted a ride, but I was doing everything on foot there. So there are a lot of hardworking taxi drivers out there, and they're not going to go by the meter. You're going to have to pay them a negotiated rate, but that's just about the only way to get around if you don't have a car.
Okay, and you mentioned the stock exchange earlier, and we've been seeing pictures of downtown Manhattan underwater. Reports earlier that the stock exchange was flooding, but those turned out not to be true?
Right, the stock exchange has flatly denied that. Now, of course, things can change, water levels can rise, but as far as I know at this moment, I think the stock exchange is okay for now. They have sandbags all around it, so that should hold things back a little bit.
Okay, and Jonathan, you cover the market. So what's the likely impact of having we're looking at now probably 2 trading days where the U.S. market will be closed. So what is the likely knock-on impact that will have?
Well, obviously, if you're running an airline or if you're holding one of their stocks or insurance companies, I think a lot of people are expecting those stocks to come down when trading begins again. We're not sure when that is, but it's looking like Wednesday, but it depends, of course, on how the situation develops. On the other hand, you have home improvement stores like Home Depot and like Lowe's, big box retailers here that sell, wood planks and windows and all those sorts of things. They'll probably benefit from a lot of buying after the stores open again. But if you take a look at the larger picture here, we have the big election, of course, happens next Tuesday, the presidential election, and you have on Friday, you have an unemployment report, which is going to be very important, both for the election as well as for investors. And you put on top of that 2 days where the market's been closed, plus the weekend. So it's 4 days here where people in the U.S. haven't really been able to trade stocks. And I think the concern is that if there's going to be heavy selling, or who knows, maybe the market will go up on Wednesday, but no matter what the situation is, there's expected to be a lot of trading on Wednesday and potentially a lot of volatility and not a lot of time for investors to settle down between when the markets open again and the election on Tuesday.
And we've heard Jonathan speak about the potential impact of the storm on different stocks in the U.S. Now, to find out what's going on in the rest of the world, joining me is markets editor Jake Lee. Okay, so Jake, Asia markets really mixed today. Any impact of the storm on trade here in Asia?
Well, I think the simple truth is there just isn't that much trading. Most traders are just glued to the dramatic pictures out of New York that you're seeing. Trading volume dramatically down across almost every asset class. And without the sort of the cues that we usually get from the US overnight and even Europe, Asian traders are just sort of holding their fire and not putting big positions on. That means, like you say, Asian markets are mixed. We did see Japan fall at the end because of a Bank of Japan decision. Not as much stimulus as expected. So that's disappointment there for holders of Japan equities. But like you say, people were really just waiting for markets to reopen in the US, and that's not going to be for a while. We know that for a second day running now, US markets will be closed. That hasn't happened since 1888 because of a weather disaster. So dramatic times and just not much happening in Asia, I'm afraid.
Okay, but we did see the price of oil today fall. A direct impact from oil refinery closures on the East Coast?
Well, oil is a big focus actually for the traders, because we've seen those East Coast refiners close down because of this huge storm. So we've seen the oil price move around. It was just starting to move back up as they came on, so we're seeing it sort of around level now. But the gasoline futures and the oil and all those sort of products of huge interest. How will they how will the refiners, how will the stockpiling cope with this? But we're not seeing any major changes. The other focus, of course, is insurers. We saw one big Australian insurer dip. Apparently it has exposure to the US, and that could be taking a heavy hit because of this storm. But aside from that, we haven't seen that much action. We just need the US markets to open and to give us a bit more of a guidance on how much economic damage we've really seen from this storm.
And I was reading on this, and you know, the market's obviously expected to be closed for 2 days, but a lot of people saying if they're actually closed more, that the market, that would probably have a bigger impact. That surprise of, you know, when is the market going to open?
We'd really be starting not quite on charted territory, but 3 days would really be something we haven't planned for at the moment. 2 days I think people can get over, but 3 days we're really going to have to bring in some new contingencies. It looks like the storm's subsiding, but clearly a huge cleanup operation to start before anything gets underway. Wednesday closure could be a possibility, and I think that's when we might see markets starting to move on their own. People have given up waiting for the US to move, and traders will have to start making their own call. That's what we're hearing, but we'll still have to wait and see.
Still a lot, I think a lot to be determined by the size of this storm. Thanks very much, markets editor Jake Lee. Okay, we earlier mentioned how transportation inside New York City was being impacted. Also, JFK, the city's airport, has been shut down due to flooding, resulting in the cancellation of thousands of flights. Earlier, I spoke to Wall Street Journal airline reporter Jack Nikas on what the potential impact could be going forward.
Yeah, we're looking at a total from Sunday and now into Wednesday, actually, about 15,000 flights. So this hurricane is actually stretching into Wednesday, or at least the disruptions from the hurricane is stretching into Wednesday, and many thousands of travelers across the U.S. and even worldwide are basically stranded trying to get back to their homes in the Northeast, and they're going to have to be waiting until later in the week until they can resume their journeys.
Okay, and I assume there's a lot of really upset passengers worldwide, for that matter. We're hearing reports here in Asia of people who can't get back to New York. What are the airlines saying people should do?
I mean, the airlines are basically saying sit tight. You know, we can't do much. Obviously, safety is the #1 priority. Basically, the timeline of what we're looking at right now is Delta Airlines and United are both looking at potentially starting flights late Tuesday. Southwest is also hoping to do some late Tuesday flights, but that's still up in the air. That, you know, we may see an entire cancellation for Tuesday, just like we saw today on Monday, and we also may see in Wednesday, you know, a lot of cancellations as well. At least American Airlines has already said they're not going to resume any services at any of these Northeast major airports until midday Wednesday.
Okay, and obviously this is an extraordinary circumstance, but any idea, should flights resume around Wednesday or so, how long it will really take to clear the backlog now that thousands have been canceled?
Yeah, it's a good question, and obviously that's going to be a big issue here. because obviously, these are some major airports. The load factors are very high. Flights are already pretty full, and many people are going to be, trying to make up these journeys. So airlines could try to add extra flights at some of these airports, and that may help ease the congestion. But we're going to see sort of a backlog probably for, I don't know, another week or so, and that will be remain to be seen. But a lot of these flights will have to be made up, and that actually will help airlines sort of limit the losses here on a lot of these flights.
Okay, and my next question was, any idea, are there any estimates out there as to how much all of this is costing the airlines, and whether or not, people who are stranded and can't get back home, are they getting any help, financial help from the airlines for, hotel bills and accommodation?
Well, so airlines do not have to reimburse or put people up in hotels, because this is actually a weather-related event. If it was something to do with on the airline's fault, they would have to. But the airlines do have to reimburse flyers for canceled flights, and they also are waiving any change fees in order to change these flights. If you have flights in the next couple days or anything like that, you can change it without having to pay a fee. Now, in terms of losses for the airlines, it's a very difficult question. It's going to be a while until we get sort of some firm estimates. The Global Business Travel Association said that a large hurricane typically can cost airlines and hotels and rental car companies about $700 million. Now, this hurricane is much larger and is much longer lasting than the hypothetical hurricane they used in that study, so that's a conservative estimate. And for some context, Delta Airlines said that they lost $15 million in profits at the Hurricane Irene last year, and they canceled 2,200 flights for that. So far, they've already canceled 2,500 flights, and likely that number is going to increase.
Okay, yeah, obviously a huge cost to airlines and a huge inconvenience to those people who are stranded. Thanks very much, Jack Nickas, joining us from Chicago. You can keep up to date on the latest Sandy news by going to WSJ.com, where we'll have a live update page, and you can also view videos that our reporters have uploaded on the WSJ World Stream. And of course, we'll have a continuous coverage tomorrow morning, New York time, with the AM News Hub at 0830 Eastern Time. I'm Deborah Kahn for the Wall Street Journal Digital Network.